Think about the last time you were looking at a big purchase, maybe a car. That price tag doesn't just appear out of thin air, does it?
No, not at all. Global events, trade policies, they all feed into it.
Exactly. And today we're diving into precisely how that works. We're focusing on General Motors, GM, and the very real effects of President Trump's global trade war.
Specifically, the uncertainty around those auto tariffs, right?
That's the one. We've got a Reuters report to walk us through it.
Okay.
And our mission really is to figure out why a giant company like GM would suddenly yank its financial forecast.
And what that tells us about the wider economy.
Right, and crucially, what it might mean for you, for your wallet.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Seeing that direct line from like high-level trade talks right down to the decisions companies like GM have to make and ultimately the prices we all see.
It really shows how tangled up the global economy is now.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's unpack this initial situation. Reuters tells us that despite all this tariff talk kind of hanging over everything, GM actually had a pretty decent start to 2025.
Yeah, surprisingly strong, actually.
Okay, the revenue in Q1, it was up 2.3%, hit $44 billion.
Which beat what the analysts were expecting, I think. They thought maybe $43 billion.
And adjusted earnings per share, $2.78, also better than forecasts.
So on the surface, things looked good, but net income was actually down a bit, wasn't it?
Yeah, down 6.6% to $2.8 billion. Still, the top line looks strong. So what was driving that, given all the, uncertainty?
Well, the report points to a couple of things. First, it seems like there was a bit of a customer rush.
People trying to buy before prices went up.
Exactly, anticipating those tariffs hitting.
Yeah.
But it's maybe also about consumer confidence dipping,
How so?
Like people making those big purchases now because they're worried things might get worse or more expensive later.
Makes sense. And the other driver?
Trucks. Big demand for trucks. GM even had to increase output at their plant in Indiana, apparently.
And overall, U.S. auto sales were up quite a bit in Q1.
Yeah, something like 17%. So strong demand was definitely there early in the year.
Okay, but here's the twist, right? Despite these decent numbers, GM pulls its forecast for the whole year's net income.
Yeah, that's the kicker. That forecast, $11.2 to $12.5 billion, it didn't even account for potential tariffs.
And the reason they pulled it, they're citing the uncertain effects of the trade war and Trump's vacillating tariff policy. That sounds pointed.
It really does. Vacillate, I mean, that word says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It gets right to the core problem for businesses trying to plan. They need stability.
Right. If the rules keep changing.
It just messes everything up. GM CFO Paul Jacobson, he basically said, look, the potential impact here could be huge.
So don't rely on the old numbers.
Pretty much. He said, we're telling folks not to rely on the prior guidance, and we'll update when we have more information around tariffs. Essentially, we don't know.
Wow. And this uncertainty, it's so significant, they even delayed their analyst call, the one where they were supposed to discuss the results and give an update.
Yep. Pushed it back to May 1st. And the reason cited was reports about updates to trade policy.
That just shows how incredibly sensitive their financial outlook is to these trade talks, like day to day almost.
Absolutely. And just to put some scale on this,
Yeah.
that Reuters report mentioned a study, Center for Automotive Research.
Yeah. What did it say?
It projected, get this, $108 billion in increased costs for U.S. automakers just this year.
$108 billion from those 25% auto tariffs that started in April.
That's the projection. It's a huge potential hit to the industry's bottom line.
Okay, but hang on. The report also mentions the administration is trying to soften the blow a bit.
Yeah, there's that. They're apparently planning to ease up on levies for foreign parts using U.S.-made cars.
Okay.
And also stop tariffs from stacking up on imported vehicles. That's supposed to start this week.
What exactly is tariff stacking? Sounds bad.
It kind of is. Imagine you tax an imported part, like an engine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that engine goes into a car built here.
Mm-hmm.
If you then also tax the finished car because it contains foreign parts, that's stacking. Tax on tax.
Ah, okay. So they're trying to avoid that double hit.
Exactly.
Okay.
And reduce the tax on the components themselves. It might help cushion the blow.
Mm-hmm.
But the fundamental uncertainty about the tariffs overall, whether they stick, how high they'll be, that's still there. These tweaks might not, completely negate potential price increases.
And GM isn't alone in feeling this heat, right?
No, not at all. The report says lots of other big companies, blue chip names.
Yeah.
They've also pulled their financial forecasts for the year. Same reason. tariff unpredictability.
So it's like a ripple effect of economic nervousness.
Pretty much. And it seems to be hitting consumers, too. Confidence is apparently weakened since mid-February.
Which is right when the tariff threats really started picking up steam.
Exactly. It's a clear link. When big companies can't plan and people start feeling anxious,
It slows things down.
right, it really hammers home that trade policy isn't just politics, it has real-world impacts.
Yeah. And the report contrasted GM with Tesla, didn't it?
It did. Tesla didn't give guidance last week either, but said they'd revisit it next quarter. So maybe just being cautious, too, in a different way.
Okay, so how is all this tariff talk actually changing behavior? Like, who's buying cars? What are competitors doing? You mentioned that pull-ahead demand.
Yeah, back in March, customers apparently rushed in figuring prices would jump.
So that boosted sales, month over month and year over year.
Looks like it, according to Cox Automotive data in the report.
And that kept going into April for GM.
Seems so. Their U.S. deliveries were up over 20% compared to last April. Strong numbers.
What about Ford and Stellantis?
Interestingly, the report says they were offering deeper discounts.
Deeper discounts. So maybe they're trying to keep sales volume up, even if it hurts margins a bit?
That could be it. Maybe they're betting the tariffs won't be so bad, or they're better positioned somehow, or just trying to grab market share while GM is perhaps being more cautious on pricing. It's a different tactic anyway.
So looking at GM specifically, how are they trying to, ride this out? It sounds like they're playing it safe.
Very much so. The focus, according to Reuters, is on actions that we can implement quickly, efficiently, and with low near-term costs.
Meaning no big, sudden strategy changes.
Doesn't sound like it. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah.
They seem to be waiting for the tariff dust to settle before making any major moves, which, honestly, makes sense.
Yeah, why make huge changes if the rules might change again next week?
Exactly. Stay flexible, focus on what you can control in the short term.
The report did mention China, though. That seemed like a slightly better story for them.
Yeah, a bit of a bright spot. Their equity income there was positive, $45 million in Q1 2025.
Which is way better than last year, right? They lost money then.
$106 million loss in Q1 2024, yeah. So it suggests maybe their restructuring efforts over there are actually starting to, yield results.
So some good news from China might help offset potential pain elsewhere.
It could provide a bit of a cushion, sure, diversification helps.
Yeah.
But then you have the analyst view.
Yes, Barclays. What
Yeah.
do they say? Not good.
Not exactly optimistic. They cut their 2025 earnings estimate for GM pretty drastically.
Not drastically.
By 40%. Earnings before interest and taxes, EBIT. They're citing lower expected sales volume and a potential gross tariff impact of like $9.5 billion.
Wow, $9.5 billion. That's massive.
It is. And it hits GM particularly hard because, as the report notes, they build just under half the cars they sell in the U.S. outside the U.S.
So they're really exposed to import tariffs.
Very exposed. And when analysts/forecasts like that, 40%, it really signals concern about future profitability.
And you can see that concern reflected in the stock price, can't you?
Absolutely. GM shares are down 12% year to date, according to the report.
Well, Ford.
Ford's actually up about 3%.
Huh. So the market seems to be viewing Ford as maybe better positioned or at least less immediately threatened by this tariff situation.
It could reflect that, yeah. Maybe investors see Ford's supply chain differently or how reliant they are on imports. It's definitely showing a divergence in market sentiment right now.
Okay, so let's try and sum this up. GM starts 2025 looking pretty strong sales-wise.
Right. Decent numbers initially.
But that gets completely overshadowed by this huge cloud of uncertainty around tariffs,
The vacillating policy.
which leads them to pull their financial guidance and basically adopt a wait-and-see approach.
Focusing on short-term, low-cost actions, playing it safe.
And it just really highlights how tightly connected global trade policy is with a massive industry like autos.
Directly impacting company health, strategy.
And ultimately, car prices and what consumers do.
Exactly. And for you, the listener, that's the key takeaway, isn't it? This kind of global economic chess game.
Yeah.
It can directly influence how much you pay for big things like a car, and it can shift the whole market around.
So understanding these forces helps you make more informed choices yourself.
Definitely. Being aware helps.
And it really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? I mean, if this is happening so visibly in the auto industry,
Yeah.
how many other sectors are facing similar, maybe quieter uncertainties because of shifting trade winds?
That's a really good question. What are the hidden ripple effects?
Right. What could the longer-term consequences be for all of us as consumers? It's definitely something to think about.